The boardroom smelled like expensive leather and betrayal. I sat frozen in my chair as Brent Calloway stood at the head of the mahogany table, presenting my work as his own. Every word that came out of his mouth was mine. The exact phrasing from my pitch deck. The precise technical explanations I'd spent months perfecting. Even the jokes I'd written to lighten the dense material. He delivered them with the confidence of a man who believed he'd already won. The 7 board members leaned forward, impressed, scribbling notes. My hands trembled in my lap. 9 months of late nights, skipped meals, and sacrificed weekends reduced to props for his performance. Then came the question that changed everything. "This is remarkable, Brent," the CFO said. "Can we see it in action?" Brent's smile froze. His eyes darted to the prototype sitting on the presentation table, then to me. For the first time that morning, genuine fear flashed across his face. He reached for the device, pressing buttons randomly. Nothing happened. The screen stayed dark. The room grew uncomfortably quiet. I stood slowly, walked to the table and picked up the device. My fingers moved across the interface with practiced ease. The screen glowed to life, displaying the dashboard I designed. The board members gasped. Brent's face went white. One board member, Elliot Price, looked between us with narrowed eyes and asked me directly, "Can you explain how this technology works?" I opened my mouth to speak. Brent shot me a look that could freeze blood. 9 months earlier, everything had been different. I'd been working in my small office until nearly midnight, fueled by cold coffee and pure excitement. The breakthrough had come suddenly, the way they always do. After weeks of failed attempts, the code finally compiled without errors. The simulation ran perfectly. I'd created something revolutionary. A predictive analytics engine that could process real-time data faster than anything on the market. I was staring at my screen, barely believing it worked, when Brent appeared in my doorway. "Burning the midnight oil again, Kara?" he asked, smiling that practiced smile that made employees feel noticed. He walked in without invitation, leaning against my desk to peer at my monitor. I should have closed my laptop. I should have told him I was just finishing up routine work. Instead, excited and naive, I walked him through my breakthrough. I explained the algorithm, the unique approach to data processing, the applications that could change our entire industry. He listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that made me feel heard. When I finished, he patted my shoulder warmly. "This is incredible work. You're going to make this company very successful." Then he asked the question I should have recognized as a warning. "So no one else understands this code but you?" I laughed, thinking he was impressed by my expertise. "Not yet. I'd need to document everything before anyone else could work on it." He nodded slowly, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. "Keep me updated on your progress. This might be bigger than you realize." The manipulation started small. Brent began dropping by my office daily, always with the excuse of checking in or seeing how my mentee was doing. He'd never called me his mentee before. In meetings about my project, he started positioning himself at the head of the table. When I presented updates, he'd interrupt with comments like, "As I was telling Kara earlier," or "following the direction I set." The phrases felt wrong, but I told myself I was being paranoid. Successful leaders took interest in their employees' work. That was normal. Then I received the meeting minutes from our weekly progress update. I scanned through the document, my coffee growing cold in my hand. Under the section labeled Project Contributors, my name appeared third. Below 2 people who'd barely touched the project. Below Brent, who was listed as Lead Developer and Project Visionary. I read it 3 times, certain I'd misunderstood. I sent a polite email to the meeting coordinator, pointing out the error. Her response came within minutes. "That's how Brent asked me to list it. Should I check with him before changing?" I stared at that email for 20 minutes. Something inside me shifted. This wasn't an accident. This was strategy. I saved the email to a folder on my personal encrypted drive, a folder I'd started calling Insurance. I didn't know why I needed insurance yet. But I was learning. The first public betrayal happened 3 weeks later. Brent had scheduled an internal presentation for the senior leadership team. 20 executives filled the conference room, including our VP of operations and the heads of 3 major departments. I'd prepared the slides myself, worked on them until 2 a.m. the night before. When I arrived that morning, Brent was already setting up. "Morning, Kara," he said cheerfully. "I'll handle the presentation. You just sit tight and answer any technical questions they might have." Something in his tone made my stomach drop, but I nodded and took a seat in the back row. Brent began presenting. "Over the past several months, my team has been developing something revolutionary under my guidance," he said. "My team. My guidance. Not Kara's breakthrough or our development team's innovation." The executives leaned forward, captivated. He walked through my slides, using my words, my explanations, my carefully crafted examples. When he reached the technical details I'd spent weeks perfecting, he stumbled slightly, glancing back at me. "The specifics are complex, but the vision is clear," he said, smoothly pivoting away from the parts he didn't fully understand. The applause was thunderous. Executives lined up to shake his hand. I sat motionless, invisible. As people filed out, our junior developer Kyle approached me, his face troubled. He leaned close and whispered, "He's been showing these slides to people for days, claiming he wrote them." I went to HR the next morning. The office was sterile, with motivational posters about integrity and transparency that suddenly felt like cruel jokes. The HR director, Patricia, smiled warmly and invited me to sit. I explained everything carefully. The removed credits, the changed attributions, the presentation where Brent claimed my work as his. Patricia listened, nodding sympathetically. She took notes on a yellow legal pad, her pen scratching softly. When I finished, she set down her pen and folded her hands. "I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, Kara," she said in a tone that immediately told me nothing would change. "But I think you might be misinterpreting Brent's leadership style. As CEO, he's responsible for the overall direction of projects. It's natural for him to speak about company innovations in broad terms. But he's specifically claiming he developed." "He meant well, I'm sure," Patricia interrupted gently. "Sometimes we can be overly sensitive about credit, especially when we've worked hard. Try to see the bigger picture." I left her office feeling stupid and small, exactly as she'd intended. I walked back to my desk, my face burning. Then I saw the email notification. Sent 10 minutes ago, while I was still in Patricia's office. From Brent. Subject line: "Checking in." My hand shook as I opened it. "Hope everything's okay. Patricia mentioned you stopped by. My door's always open if you need to talk." He knew. He knew exactly where I'd been and exactly what I'd said. The cameras, the corridors, the whispers, this company was his, and I was playing a game where he controlled all the pieces. The sabotage began 2 days after my HR visit. I arrived Monday morning to find sections of my code mysteriously corrupted. Files I'd organized meticulously were moved or renamed. Error logs showed access attempts to my workspace at 11:47 p.m. on Saturday, when the building should have been nearly empty. I checked the security logs. The entry was logged to Ashley, Brent's temporary administrative assistant, a 23-year-old fresh from college who shadowed him constantly. I found her at the coffee machine, looking nervous when she saw me approaching. "Ashley, did you access my workspace this weekend?" I asked quietly. Her face flushed red. I'm so sorry. Mr. Calloway asked me to retrieve some files. He said it was his project and that you knew about it. He gave me your access codes." My stomach clenched. "He gave you my access codes." She nodded miserably. "He said you two were collaborating and that I should grab the latest version. I didn't think. I'm really sorry. She wasn't the villain here. She was just another piece Brent was moving." That afternoon I began the systematic backup of everything. Every line of code, every design document, every email thread. I transferred copies to my personal encrypted cloud storage, which company policy explicitly permitted for backup purposes. Nothing illegal. Nothing hidden. Just protection. That night, working alone in my office, I made a decision. I added a final piece to the code, a security handshake that required biometric authentication. My fingerprint specifically. It was the last step I'd always planned to implement anyway. Without it, the prototype would boot but wouldn't fully activate. The next morning, Brent cornered me outside the elevator. His cologne was too strong, his smile too bright. "Kara, I wanted to touch base about the prototype," he said casually. "Is it fully operational? Ready for demonstrations?" I met his eyes steadily. "Almost. I'm finishing the final security protocols this week." "Security protocols?" His smile tightened slightly. "Is that necessary? Might slow down our timeline." "It's industry standard," I replied. "Any enterprise-level system needs authentication. I'm building in biometric verification to prevent unauthorized access." Something flickered across his face. Annoyance, maybe concern. "How long will that take?" "Should be done by Friday." He nodded slowly, processing this obstacle he hadn't anticipated. "Keep it simple, Kara. We don't need anything too complex." Smiled. "Of course." As he walked away, I felt the weight of what I'd just done. The prototype was now mine in a way that couldn't be stolen with passwords or copied code. It required me. That night I ran the final test. The device hummed to life, scanning my fingerprint, verifying my identity through the encrypted authentication system I designed. The dashboard glowed bright, displaying perfect data streams. Then I tested it without my fingerprint, using a generic access code. The screen stayed dark. A simple message appeared. "Authentication required." It worked perfectly. Brent could present my work all he wanted. He could claim credit in meetings and presentations. But he couldn't make it run. Not without me. I thought I could trust her. I really did. Marisol had been my friend for 3 years, the person I'd grabbed lunch with, complained to about deadlines, celebrated promotions with over wine. When the pressure of Brent's theft became unbearable, I confided in her. We were in her car, parked outside a cafe during lunch break. I told her everything. How Brent was systematically erasing my contributions. How HR had dismissed my concerns. How isolated I felt. She listened, her face sympathetic, her hand on my arm. "That's horrible, Kara. You need to protect yourself," she said. "Have you thought about going over his head? Directly to the board?" "I don't have access to the board," I admitted. "Brent controls all those relationships." "What about documentation? Emails, files, anything proving the work is yours?" I hesitated, then told her about my backup system, the encrypted files, the timestamps proving my authorship. She nodded thoughtfully. "Smart. Keep everything organized. You might need it." 2 days later, I was in a meeting when Brent made a comment that stopped my heart. We were discussing project timelines when he casually said, "As I mentioned to Marisol, we need to ensure our documentation is airtight before we present to the board. Can't have any questions about provenance." The exact word I'd used with Marisol. Provenance. Not a common business term. The room continued talking, but I couldn't hear anything over the rushing in my ears. After the meeting, I saw Marisol leaving Brent's office. She was smiling. Not the sympathetic smile she'd given me in the car. Satisfied, smug smile. I was loading my laptop into my car after work when someone cleared their throat behind me. I turned to find Elliot Price, one of the board members I'd only met twice. He was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Ms. Ellison," he said politely. "Working late, I see." "Just heading home, actually." He nodded, glancing around the nearly empty parking lot. What he said next was carefully neutral, the kind of statement that could mean nothing or everything. "I've been hearing interesting things about the new analytics project. Some people say leadership is taking too much credit." Kept my face blank. I couldn't comment on that. Of course not, he agreed. Complicated situation. But if someone were to ask, hypothetically, could you prove the work was yours? The question hung in the air between us. I understood immediately that this wasn't a random conversation. Elliot was testing me, offering me something without explicitly offering anything. Hypothetically, I said slowly, I keep very thorough documentation. Timestamps, version histories, email chains. Everything. He smiled slightly. Good. Documentation matters. He started to walk away, then paused. The board meeting is scheduled for 4 weeks from now. Brent will be presenting several initiatives. I imagine your project will be featured prominently. He met my eyes meaningfully. Should be an interesting presentation. He walked away, leaving me standing in the parking lot, my mind racing. The board was suspicious. They were watching. And Elliot had just told me they'd be paying very close attention in 4 weeks. I drove home and immediately checked my calendar. 4 weeks. I had 4 weeks to prepare for whatever was coming. The call from Patricia came on a Tuesday. Kara, can you stop by my office? Just a quick check-in. The tone was too casual, the request too vague. I knew immediately this wasn't good. When I arrived, Patricia wasn't alone. Brent's VP of Operations, Thomas, sat beside her, both wearing expressions of practiced concern. We wanted to discuss your role, Patricia began. As the company evolves, we're re-evaluating our structure. Thomas jumped in. We think your talents might be better utilized supporting other initiatives. Fresh challenges, new growth opportunities. They were removing me from my own project. The words were corporate soft, but the message was clear. You want me off the analytics project, I said flatly. We want what's best for your career development, Patricia corrected. Sometimes we can become too attached to one project. Diversifying your experience makes you more valuable. When would this transition happen? We're thinking after the board presentation, Thomas said. Brent will handle the presentation naturally, and then we'll shift resources. After the board presentation. After Brent secured credit for my work. After the story was set in stone. I'll need to think about this, I managed. That night, I received an email from TechVista Solutions, a competitor I'd met at a conference 6 months ago. They'd been trying to recruit me ever since. Kara, I know you said you weren't interested in moving, but I wanted to reach out one more time. We have a senior leadership position opening up, and I immediately thought of you. Any chance you'd be willing to talk? I took the call with TechVista the next day, working from home, door locked. The recruiter, James, was enthusiastic and direct. They'd been following my work, which apparently was more publicly visible than I'd realized. We've seen your patents, your conference presentations, your published research, he said. We want someone who can lead innovation, not just implement it. Over the next 2 weeks, I interviewed with 4 people, all virtually, all carefully scheduled during my lunch breaks or early mornings. Each conversation felt like remembering what it was like to be valued. They asked my opinion. They listened to my ideas. They saw me. The offer came on a Friday. Senior Director of Analytics. Full autonomy over my team. 30% salary increase. Stock options. We'd love for you to start as soon as possible, James said. Calculated quickly. I can start in 4 weeks. I need to finish some obligations here. Perfect. We'll send the formal offer today. I accepted it an hour later, sitting in my car, my hands shaking. Then I looked at my calendar. The board meeting was scheduled for exactly 4 weeks from today. The timing was perfect. Almost too perfect. I laughed out loud in my empty car, the first time I'd laughed in months. Brent had scheduled his big moment, his public victory, for the exact week I'd planned to leave. He was going to present my work to the board, claim credit for everything and try to push me aside. But I'd be holding the resignation letter. And the only activation code. Brent's behavior shifted dramatically. He'd always been calculated, but now he became suffocating. He appeared at my desk constantly, asking about my weekend, my health, my satisfaction with my work. He brought me coffee one morning, An unprecedented gesture that made Kyle's eyebrows shoot up across the office. Just wanted to check in, Brent said, setting the expensive cafe cup on my desk. You've seemed distant lately. Everything okay? Everything's fine, I lied. Good, good. He lingered awkwardly. You know, after the board presentation, I'm thinking we should discuss your career path. Maybe a promotion. You've earned it. The promise came too late and meant nothing. Smiled. That's generous. You're valuable to this company, Kara. To me personally. The words should have been reassuring. Instead, they felt like chains. That afternoon, I overheard him on a call through his half-open office door. I'd stopped by to drop off reports and heard my name. Once the board signs off on the project, she's no longer a threat, Brent said quietly. We can restructure her role however we want. Maybe move her to maintenance and support. I backed away silently, my heart hammering. Threat. He saw me as a threat. Not a colleague, not an employee. A problem to be managed. That night, I worked on my documentation, organizing every piece of evidence into a clear, undeniable timeline. Every email, every file version, every timestamp. I wasn't building a weapon. I was building truth. The final week arrived. I moved through the office like a ghost, quietly competent, professionally invisible. I helped Brent prepare for his presentation, offering technical suggestions when asked, never volunteering information. He'd requested I bring the prototype to the board meeting for the demonstration. You'll be there, right? He asked too casually. Of course, I said. Good. I want to make sure everything runs smoothly. He didn't say what we both knew. He needed me there because he couldn't operate the device without me. I spent hours organizing my files, creating a comprehensive folder that told the complete story. Document creation dates, email timestamps, code commit logs with my username. Everything chronological, everything clear. Nothing exaggerated. Nothing fabricated. Just the truth laid out cleanly. On Wednesday, Elliot Price sent me a brief email. Looking forward to Friday's presentation. I anticipate it will be very informative. No other context. No explanation needed. On Thursday night, I packed my office slowly. Personal photos, my favorite mug, the small plant that had survived 2 years on my desk. Nothing obvious, nothing that would trigger questions. Just gradually emptying my space. I practiced in the mirror, rehearsing my calm reaction. I knew Brent would try to embarrass me. I knew he'd take credit publicly. I needed to stay composed, professional, unshakable. At midnight, sitting in my apartment with tea going cold, I whispered to my reflection. Tomorrow it ends. Friday morning arrived gray and cold. I dressed carefully, professionally. In the navy suit I saved for important meetings. The prototype sat in its case beside my door, powered down, innocent looking. Picked it up, feeling its weight. This small device held 9 months of my life. I arrived early. The boardroom was already being set up, the long table polished, chairs precisely positioned. 7 board members would attend, including Elliot. I placed the prototype on the presentation table and sat in the back row where I'd been instructed to sit. Not at the table. Not presenting. Just available for technical support. Other department heads filtered in. Brent arrived last, commanding the room immediately with his presence. He wore his most expensive suit and his most confident smile. He glanced at me once, a look that said everything. Stay quiet. Stay small. Me have this. The board members took their seats. Brent began his presentation. Good morning. Today I'm excited to share a breakthrough that will revolutionize our position in the market. I watched him present my work. My words. My diagrams. My careful explanations. He'd practiced, I'd give him that. He delivered my jokes with perfect timing. The board was captivated. And then came the question. This is remarkable, Brent, the CFO said. Can we see it in action? Brent's smile froze for just a fraction of a second. Absolutely, he said smoothly. Let me just. He reached for the prototype, his fingers fumbling slightly with the case. He pressed the power button. The device hummed to life, the screen glowing softly. So far so good. He pressed the activation sequence, the one I'd walked him through in meetings. The screen displayed the startup sequence, loading bars progressing normally. Then it stopped. Authentication required appeared in simple gray text. Brent pressed more buttons. He tried swiping, tapping, entering codes. The message didn't change. The room grew quiet. The board members exchanged glances. Sweat appeared on Brent's forehead. "Just a minor technical glitch," he said, his voice tight. "Sometimes these prototypes. Would you like me to help?" I asked quietly from my seat. Every head turned toward me. Brent's face flashed with anger, then forced gratitude. "That would be great, Kara." I stood slowly and walked to the front. The prototype looked small and innocent on the mahogany table. I picked it up, feeling familiar. My fingers moved across the interface with muscle memory. I placed my thumb on the biometric sensor. The device chirped softly. The screen came alive, transitioning from the locked state to the full dashboard. Data streams appeared, graphs populated with real-time analytics, the interface I designed flowing smoothly. The board members leaned forward. The CFO's eyes widened. Elliot Price was watching Brent, not the screen. "As you can see," I said calmly, "the system processes data streams in real time, using predictive algorithms to—" "Thank you, Kara," Brent interrupted. "I can take it from here." But Elliot spoke up. "Actually, Ms. Ellison, could you continue? I'd like to understand the technical specifications." I explained the technology clearly, simply, the way I'd rehearsed 100 times in my head. I walked through the algorithms, the unique data processing approach, the applications that made this revolutionary. The board members asked questions. Good questions. Technical questions that Brent couldn't have answered. I answered each one precisely, demonstrating deep knowledge that could only come from creation, not presentation. Brent stood awkwardly to the side, his moment stolen, his performance interrupted. He tried interjecting several times with vague comments about the vision and strategic direction, but his words sounded hollow against my detailed explanations. Finally, Elliot asked the question that changed everything. He looked directly at Brent. "Why couldn't you activate the device?" Brent's face went red. "Well, Kara implemented some last-minute security features. I wasn't aware." "Last minute," I said quietly. "The biometric authentication has been part of the design specification for 6 months. It's documented in every progress report." Elliot's expression didn't change, but something sharp flickered in his eyes. "I see." The CFO spoke up. "Brent, you mentioned you developed this prototype, but you seem unfamiliar with its basic operation." "I led the development," Brent said, his voice rising slightly. "Leadership doesn't mean knowing every minor technical detail. Biometric authentication isn't a minor detail," the VP of Technology interrupted. "It's fundamental to security architecture." The room's atmosphere shifted. The board members were no longer impressed. They were suspicious. "Perhaps," Elliot said carefully, "it would be helpful to review the development timeline. Ms. Ellison, do you have documentation showing the project's evolution?" I'd been waiting for this moment. I pulled a tablet from my bag and handed it to Elliot. "This folder contains the complete development history. Every file is time-stamped and version-tracked." Elliot opened the folder. His eyes scanned the documents, and I watched his expression tighten. He passed the tablet to the CFO, who flipped through the files with increasing interest. The board members passed the tablet around the table. The silence stretched, broken only by the soft sounds of pages being scrolled. Brent stood frozen, watching his career crumble in real time. "These documents," the VP of Technology said slowly, "show Ms. Ellison as the primary developer on every file. The earliest documents are dated 9 months ago, authored by her." "I supervised the project," Brent insisted. "My guidance, There's an email here, Elliot interrupted, reading from the tablet. Dated 9 months ago. From Ms. Ellison to you, describing her breakthrough. Your response was, "This is incredible work. You're going to make this company very successful." Nothing about your guidance or direction. Brent's face went white. You're taking things out of context. And here's a meeting minutes document from 2 months ago, the CFO added. The project contributors list shows you as lead developer, but the version history shows Ms. Ellison created the original document with her name first. The changes putting you at the top were made by your administrative assistant. The walls were closing in. Brent's carefully constructed narrative was disintegrating. Brent's composure finally cracked. You think she could have done this without me? He shouted, pointing at me. Without my support, my resources, my leadership? The outburst shocked the room. This wasn't the polished CEO they knew. This was desperation. I gave her the opportunity, he continued, his voice shaking. I provided the budget, the time, the strategic vision. She was just the technician executing my direction. Mr. Calloway, Elliot said coldly. The documentation shows Ms. Ellison working on this project during weekends and evenings, outside normal hours. She used personal equipment for many of the breakthroughs. Your involvement appears limited to attending status meetings. This is absurd, Brent snapped. I'm the CEO of this company. Are you seriously going to believe that I would steal credit from an employee? We're looking at evidence, the CFO said flatly. And right now, the evidence is concerning. Brent turned to me. His expression a mix of fury and pleading. Tell them, Kara. Tell them how much I helped you. How I mentored you. Every eye in the room turned to me. This was the moment. I could be diplomatic. I could soften the truth. I could protect my former relationship with him. Instead, I spoke clearly. You asked me 9 months ago if anyone else understood my code. Said no. You told me to keep you updated. You didn't mentor me. You monitored me. The room went silent. Brent looked like I'd physically struck him. I think, Elliot said quietly, we need to have a private conversation. Ms. Ellison, would you be available to speak with the board separately? The board dismissed Brent and asked me to stay. The 7 of them sat on one side of the table. I sat alone on the other, my hands folded calmly in my lap. Elliot spoke first. Ms. Ellison, we need to understand the full situation. Please tell us your side from the beginning. I did. I walked them through 9 months methodically. The initial breakthrough, Brent's increasing involvement, the changed attributions, the meeting minutes, the HR dismissal, the code sabotage, the gradual erasure of my contributions. Kept my voice calm and factual. No accusations, no emotions. Just timeline. I showed them emails, document histories, meeting recordings. Everything time-stamped, everything verifiable. The CFO asked. Why did you implement biometric authentication without informing Mr. Calloway? It was always part of the security specification, I replied. I informed him 2 weeks ago that I was completing the final security protocols. He asked me to keep it simple. But you specifically made it so only you could activate it. I made it so only authorized personnel could activate it. Currently, that's me because I'm the only one with security clearance level 4. The system can easily be expanded to include other authorized users once proper clearance is established. It was technically true. The system could be modified. By me. Elliot studied me carefully. Everything you've shown us matches what we've been suspicious of for some time. This isn't the first complaint we've received about Mr. Calloway's leadership style. I kept my face neutral, but my heart hammered. They'd been watching. They'd known something was wrong. The meeting ended around noon. The board thanked me and asked me to wait while they spoke with Brent privately. I returned to my office, my legs shaking. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Brent's extension. I let it ring twice before answering. Come to my office. Now. His voice was barely controlled fury. I walked slowly to the executive floor. Brent's office was huge, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He stood with his back to me, staring out at the skyline. "Close the door," he said without turning. Closed it. "You blindsided me," he said, his voice shaking. "I gave you opportunities. I elevated your work. And you blindsided me in front of the entire board." "I documented the truth," I replied calmly. "That's not the same as betrayal." He spun around, his face red. "The truth. You made me look like a fool. Do you understand what you've done to my reputation?" "I understand what you did to my career," I said quietly. "For 9 months you erased me. You took my work and pretended it was yours. You had HR dismiss my concerns. You tried to push me off my own project. I was going to promote you," he shouted. "After the board meeting, I was going to give you everything you wanted. After you secured the credit," I said. "After the narrative was set." He stared at me, breathing hard. Then his expression changed. The anger shifted to something else. Calculation. Fear. "You're not planning to leave, are you?" he asked suddenly. Question hung between us. I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope. His face went pale as I placed it on his desk. "My resignation letter," I said quietly. "Effective today." Brent grabbed the letter, his hands trembling. He read it once, then again, as if the words might change. "You can't," he whispered. "You can't just leave." "I can, and I am. The board, they'll think I pushed you out. This will look terrible. That's not my problem." His desperation was almost pathetic. He sank into his chair, the expensive leather creaking. "What do you want?" "More money. Title. I'll make you VP. I'll give you anything." "I don't want anything from you." "Please," he said, and the word sounded foreign in his mouth. "For the sake of the company. Think about the team, the projects, the clients who depend on this technology." "I have thought about them," I said. "That's why I documented everything so carefully. The next developer will have complete instructions. The work won't suffer." "There is no next developer," he snapped. "You're the only one who fully understands this system. If you leave, the board will see it as a failure of my leadership. They'll—" He stopped, realizing he was admitting his vulnerability out loud. "They'll what?" "Yes." He met my eyes, and for the first time I saw genuine fear. "They'll remove me." Picked up my bag. "My last day is today. HR has all the transition documentation they need." I walked to the door. "Kara, wait." I turned back. "I hope your next innovation is actually yours, Brent." Then I left, closing the door quietly behind me. I was packing the last items from my desk when my phone rang. The executive assistant's voice was crisp. "Ms. Ellison, the board has requested your presence. Conference room A." Kyle looked up from his computer, eyes wide. "What's happening?" "I'm not sure," I said honestly. I rode the elevator up, my heart pounding. Had they changed their minds? Were they going to accuse me of sabotage? The 7 board members sat waiting. Elliot gestured to a seat. "Ms. Ellison, we've spent the last hour in discussion. We'd like to make you an offer." I sat slowly. "We recognize that this company failed you," the CFO said. "Mr. Calloway's actions were unacceptable. We'd like to offer you his position, effective immediately. CEO of the Analytics Division, reporting directly to the board. Substantial salary increase, full creative control, and a formal apology for how you were treated." The offer hung in the air. Everything I should want. Vindication. Power. Justice. I looked around the table at their expectant faces. "That's incredibly generous," I said carefully. "But I have to decline." Surprise rippled through the room. "You're refusing?" the VP asked. "I've accepted a position elsewhere. I start Monday." Elliot studied me. "May I ask where?" "TechVista Solutions. Senior Director of Analytics." Several board members nodded, recognizing the name. Competitor but a respected one. "I hope you understand," I continued. "I need a fresh start. Somewhere my work is valued from day one." Elliot smiled slightly. We understand completely. For what it's worth, Ms. Ellison, I think they're very lucky to have you. He stood, extending his hand. And Brent won't last the month. 2 weeks passed before I heard the news. I was settling into my new office at TechVista, a bright space with windows that actually opened, when Kyle texted me. You need to see this. He sent a link to an internal company announcement. My hands trembled as I opened it. After careful consideration, Brent Calloway has decided to step down as CEO to pursue other opportunities. We thank him for his service and wish him well in future endeavors. The corporate language couldn't hide the truth. He'd been forced out. I set down my phone and stared out the window. It was done. That afternoon, more news filtered through my old colleagues. Marisol had been quietly transferred to a different department, her reputation damaged. Patricia in HR was pursuing opportunities elsewhere. The company was cleaning house. My phone buzzed with a message from Elliot. Justice served. Your former prototype is being properly credited in all materials. We've established a new policy on intellectual property attribution. You helped us fix a broken system. I smiled, saved the message, and returned to work. My new team was waiting for a meeting where I'd present my vision. My vision. My name on the slides. My voice in the room. At TechVista, I wasn't fighting to be seen. I was leading from day one. That evening, I received an email notification. My former company had filed patent paperwork for the analytics engine. Listed inventor. Kara Ellison. Better late than never. I forwarded the patent filing to my personal archive, adding it to the folder labeled Evidence. But I renamed the folder. Now it was called Victory. 3 months into my new role, everything clicked into place. My team at TechVista was brilliant, eager, collaborative. We expanded the analytics engine, adding features I'd dreamed about but never had resources to build. The prototype I'd created in stolen hours at my old job became the flagship product of my new company. My name was on every presentation, every press release, every patent filing. We pitched to clients I'd only dreamed of reaching. The respect was intoxicating. In meetings, people listened when I spoke. They asked for my opinion. They valued my expertise. No one questioned whether I deserved to be in the room. My salary increase meant I could finally afford the apartment I'd been dreaming about. I bought new furniture, not the hand-me-downs I'd been making work. I took my first real vacation in 5 years. One Tuesday afternoon, James from HR stopped by my office. Kara, I wanted to let you know. You've been invited to keynote the National Analytics Conference in 6 months. They specifically requested you. The National Analytics Conference. The biggest industry event of the year. Hundreds of professionals, major media coverage, career-defining visibility. They want me. Asked stunned. They want the person who revolutionized predictive analytics, James smiled. That's you. Accepted immediately. The next 6 months flew by in a blur of successful projects, happy clients, and a team that actually functioned like a team. No politics, no stolen credit, no looking over my shoulder. Just work. Good work. When the conference date arrived, I flew to Chicago with my presentation polished and my confidence solid. The keynote hall was enormous. 1,500 seats, all filled. The stage lights were bright and hot. I stood backstage, breathing slowly, remembering the terrified woman who'd sat silently while Brent presented her work. That woman was gone. I walked on stage to applause. The moderator introduced me with words I'd never heard applied to myself. Visionary. Innovator. Industry leader. I presented for 45 minutes. I walked the audience through the technology, the applications, the future of analytics. I made them laugh with carefully placed humor. I made them think with challenging questions. When I finished, the applause was thunderous. The Q&A session began. Hands shot up across the auditorium. Technical questions, strategic questions, career advice questions. Then someone in the middle section stood. Ms. Ellison, your career trajectory is inspiring. But I've heard you faced significant adversity at your previous company. How did you handle that? The room went quiet. Everyone knew the stories. Tech was a small world, and word had spread about Brent's downfall. I smiled, thinking of his face in that boardroom, sweating and desperate. I thought about the 9 months of theft, the humiliation, the nights I'd cried in my car. Then I thought about the documentation, the preparation, the moment I'd activated my prototype in front of the board. When people try to steal your work, I said clearly, let them. They expose themselves faster than you ever could. Just make sure you document everything and protect what's yours. The truth has a way of coming out, especially when you've built something only you can fully operate. The audience erupted in applause. Some people stood. I saw tears in a few eyes, recognition from others who'd fought similar battles. As I walked off stage, I pulled out my phone. One new message from Elliot. Watched your keynote online. Brilliant. You've come far. I typed back. I was always this good. Now people can see it. The victory wasn't just about revenge or justice. It was about finally being visible, valued, and free. I'd built something beautiful, protected it fiercely, and now I stood in the spotlight that should have been mine from the beginning. Some stories end with villains punished. This one ended with a woman who refused to stay small, documented her worth, and walked away with everything she'd earned. The applause echoed in my ears as I headed to the reception, where people were waiting to talk to me. Not to Brent. Not to anyone else. Me. Finally, perfectly, to me.